Everyone has those moments in their life where they're super high in Iman and they're excited and motivated to do all the sunnahs and nafil prayers and everything Allah commanded and more. But you probably also had those moments in your life where you're demotivated and you feel lazy. You feel like all you could do was the obligatory things and barely even that. The truth is, this is completely normal, and the Prophet ﷺ talked about this a lot. For example, he once said that there's a time for this and a time for that. Now, this was specifically for the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in regards to the fact that sometimes they would be with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those times they would be high in iman. But sometimes they would be with their families or with their work and doing anything else that's probably not Islamic, and their iman would naturally not be as high. Therefore, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that your iman is not going to be the same all of the time. In regards to the Sahaba, their iman is obviously going to be higher when they're with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when they're doing other things like with their family and with their work or anything else, their iman is just naturally not going to be as high. And this is the same for all of us. Our iman is simply going to fluctuate. So it's not like you're doing anything wrong if you're demotivated or you feel like your iman is low. Rather, it's just a natural process of life. And there's another thing you actually need to know, which is that if you're in the state of demotivation or laziness, it's most likely a consequence of your own actions, meaning that you actually did something to bring you to this position, and that also means you could do something to get you out of this position. So inshallah, with this video, if you're in that position of feeling like you're low in motivation and low in iman, and you feel laziness take over your heart, you'll know exactly what you need to do to get out of that and to get into that position where you're highly motivated and you're doing the things you know that you should be doing. The first thing that you need to know is that if you're low in motivation, you need to take things slowly and progress slowly. And this sounds pretty obvious and you might think you already understand this, but a lot of people don't implement this simply because of arrogance and ego. See, what happens a lot, for example, is you might have done a habit in the past. Let's say, for example, reading Quran for 20 or 30 minutes every single day. And now that you're, kind of demotivated and low in iman, you've kind of fallen off that habit. What happens is when you try and get back onto that habit, you go directly from reading no Quran at all to reading 30 minutes a day consistently. The issue is that's too abrupt of a change. But you feel like you can do it because you did it in the past. So it feels kind of weird to start at something lower and progress slowly. But going from no Quran a day to 30 minutes a day consistently is honestly too quick of a change. You have to progress into it slowly, especially if you're in that position where you're low in iman and low in motivation. So you might feel like because you did so much in the past that you could do so much right now, but because it's a habit, the way habits work is you have to build up that habit and make it stick before you can actually start snowballing it and increasing time. So what I mean is start with just a couple of verses or maybe a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes a day of Quran. That's something that's so easy that you're probably going to be able to do it consistently. It's not going to be difficult for you, right? So once you do that and make it a consistent habit, then you could start adding time, go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 20 minutes and eventually get back to where you once were. So what I recommend you do if you're low in iman and motivation is first of all stick to those things that are obligatory, especially like your 5 daily prayers and all of those things. And then once you're good with that, slowly start adding back in those sunnahs, those good habits like reading Quran, praying tahajjud and all of those things like that. And you want to make it easy on yourself so these things become habits and they stick, and then kind of scale them up and do more and more. So that's the first thing, and honestly one of the most important things, which is to slowly ease back into those good habits that you might have once done but you've kind of fallen off of. The next thing is to constantly remind yourself, or at least have an objective. See, what happens a lot is the reason why you're lacking motivation is simply because you don't have an objective in your head, or you're not reminding yourself of it a lot. If you look in the Quran, notice how Allah constantly reminds us of two things: the promise of Jannah and of course the punishment of Jahannam and Allah's wrath. The reason why is because, as a lot of the Salaf used to talk about, the person who's constantly preoccupied with Jannah in their head is going to do good deeds, and the person who always thinks of Allah's wrath and thinks of Jahannam and Allah's punishment is going to stay away from sins. It's simply a fact that if you're constantly reminding yourself of your objective, for example, of Jannah, then you're going to be more likely to do the things that lead you to that objective. That's why dhikr is so important to us Muslims, constantly remembering Allah, remembering Jannah, and also kind of the opposite, remembering Allah's punishment and all of the bad things that could happen to us. The same thing has to happen to you and your objectives. This could be in an Islamic sense or not even in an Islamic sense. Maybe you have a goal that's not necessarily Islamic, like maybe it's in your school or your work or anything like that. You have to have some way of constantly reminding yourself of your objective. Most successful people in the world, even if you're thinking like money or all of those things, constantly remind themselves, and they basically only think of one thing, which is their objective in terms of success or money. So if you're demotivated or low in iman, it's probably because you lost sight of those things that once motivated you, of your objectives and your goals. Now, of course, if you don't have any objectives or goals at all, then that's one problem. But even if you do, you constantly have to remind yourself of those objectives and of your goals to kind of keep that fire in yourself burning. Now, honestly, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. A lot of people like to write down their goals on a piece of paper and constantly look at it, look at their goals every single day. And that's a really powerful strategy. Another great thing is using dua. If you have an objective, constantly make dua. Every single day, every single prayer, every single sujood, make a certain dua. Honestly, this is another massive thing in breaking free from demotivation and laziness, is constantly making dua to Allah. So you have to understand that at the end of the day, Allah is the one that gives you that motivation and that gives you that ability to do anything at all. So you have to ask Him constantly. Fortunately, a lot of us do not make enough dua. I want you to understand that if you do not make dua to Allah, you're basically saying that you are self-sufficient, that you do not need Allah. But it's the complete opposite. You need Allah for literally everything, and that's why you should constantly be making dua to Allah. Now also, I'll leave up on screen a really powerful dua against laziness and also anxiety and debt and a couple of other stuff. But this dua really helps you. Constantly ask Allah, in your sujood, maybe tahajjud, all of those specific times, for motivation and to break free from laziness and actually the ability to get to your objectives. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is going to be slightly different, but it is a super important point, and that is with evil eye. You might not think that this is you, or it might not even register in your brain, like you didn't even think about it, but evil eye is a massive reason why so many people that were once successful or were once doing good things fall off and become demotivated. And this happens a lot because as you start doing something good, people notice and people become jealous and of course give you evil eye. And that evil eye happens to be the thing that throws you off and makes you demotivated. This happens a lot, for example, with like students of knowledge, or not even just students of knowledge, but students in general. As you do good in your studies and maybe religious studies and all of these good things, people look at you and people may cast evil eye on you, and a lot of people fall off simply for that reason. What I recommend to you is don't just ignore this and actually constantly think about this, because this is something that can happen to literally anyone, and a lot of times it might be difficult to spot. What you need to be doing is constant ruqyah. Surah Baqarah, specifically the last two verses, are very good. You should be constantly reading those, every single day, and do your daily dhikrs, your morning dhikr, your evening dhikr, and all of those protections, because these are the things that are going to protect you from evil eye. Now, there's a couple of other things that may protect you from evil eye or even cure you from evil eye. So I'll link an Islam Q&A article in the description all about evil eye and ruqyah and everything that you can do. But it's really important that you do these daily dhikrs and protections and, actually protect yourself against evil eye. And the other thing that's also important, other than ruqyah, is protecting yourself in the first place before someone can give you evil eye. And what this means is not showing off, not constantly telling everyone about all of your achievements or boasting about yourself or doing anything that might make someone jealous or have hasad or envy in their heart. See, this is a real problem because a lot of people just love boasting and talking about themselves. But if you do something really good, if there's a deed that you did that's super amazing, if something really good happens to you, if you achieved something great, these are things that you should generally keep to yourself, and you should not spread to literally everyone just because, it might make you feel good. Honestly, this whole idea of evil eye is something I really wanted to touch on because it's something that you might not even realize you have or realize that you might be suffering from, but it is a massive problem. Anyway, use these pieces of advice because I'm telling you they will really help you. Start off slow, progress through your sunnahs and start with your obligatory acts and slowly add in those good things and good habits. Then also constantly be making dua, remind yourself of your objective and understand that you need to be doing these ruqyas and daily dhikrs and protect yourself against evil eye. That's all I have for this video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.